Renly Baratheon came to him in the rain. The torchlight in the Tower of the Hand threw a frail gold across the stone, and wet leather smelled like a stable. Eddard Stark stood by the window and listened to the water seize the gutters and fling itself to the yard. Renly slipped into the chamber without ceremony, cloaks damp, a hood shadowing a face that could have been carved for laughing but was not laughing now. Behind him, Loras Tyrell hovered with a hand on the pommel of his sword in a way that would look casual to anyone who had never watched fighting men pretend at ease. "You shouldn't be here," Ned said quietly. He had slept little since the king collapsed from the boar's tusk. He had slept less with the memory of a boy being pushed from a tower shadowing him from Winterfell to King's Landing, and the book of lineages on the table like a prayer. He had no taste to speak. "I know what I shouldn't do," Renly said, throwing back his hood. Rain had slicked black his hair, and his green doublet showed dark where the storm had touched it. "And I know what I must. My brother is dying. Tell me I lie." Ned pulled the shutters half closed. The rain narrowed to a hiss. "He is dying." Renly's throat worked. He sat without waiting to be asked, as if he could not trust his knees. "He loved the wrong sport at the wrong time," he muttered, more to himself than to Ned. "And now a boar wears his crown." "He named me Protector," Ned said. "I know," Renly said. "Pycelle told me after old Walton went to bring Cersei to the bedchamber. A bad idea, bringing the lioness to a stag's death. But Pycelle says the words as if the gods had painted them on his tongue." He watched Ned, eyes sharp and measuring. "He named you Protector. That makes you the man who must act." "I will act," Ned said, "when the time is proper. The time is now." Renly leaned forward. "Tonight, before dawn empties the shadows." His mouth tightened. "You know what she is. Don't pretend you hadn't guessed before you dragged Jon Arryn's old book up from the dust. You and I are not alike, Lord Stark. I do not pretend to be the soul of honor. But even I know what happens when the lioness wakes to find a wolf perched on her cub." Ned's hand moved across the table and rested on the book as if it were a sword hilt. The parchment was creased where he had turned one page too many times. Baratheon Black, Baratheon Black. The seed of the stag like ink spilled across 100 names. "She has 3 children. She has 3 weapons," Renly snapped, then mastered his voice. "Listen to me, for once listen. I have 100 swords within my command in this city. Good men, not Lannisters. They wear my doe and my stag. They will answer to me at a word. Loras commands them when I do not. With those swords, with yours, with the city watch, we can take the Red Keep by dawn." He held up a hand before Ned could speak. "We do not spill a child's blood. I'm no fool and no monster. We take Joffrey, Tommen, and Myrcella into custody. We separate them from their mother. We seize the treasuries and the gates. When my brother dies, you sit the throne as Protector, you summon Stannis. All the gods know he loves summons, and we set the realm in order." Ned stared at him. Loras Tyrell breathed like a cat at the hearth, quiet and contained. A boy still, but his eyes were as bright and hard as new coins. He thought of Robert as he had known him at 17, the way laughter can be a weapon, the way a friend's arm over your shoulder can feel like a promise to never die. He thought of Stannis Baratheon, the word lawful made flesh, stern as the wind that lives on Dragonstone's cliffs. He thought of the children, and of the book, and of Catelyn's voice as she said she had done what she must at the Inn of the Crossroads. He thought of Littlefinger's wry mouth and eyes like a pool that kept its secrets under drifting leaves. He thought of Varys's soft hands like sleep. "Stannis is the rightful heir," Ned said. "If we do this, it must be done in his name. He is my lawful king the moment Robert dies." Renly's smile was small and not unkind. "You always do love the steep path. What I ask is not that you call me king. I ask that you call me ally." "Why?" Ned said. "If the law is not enough for you, why not go to Cersei and bargain? Why not run to your seat and raise your banners and see if the river runs faster than the sea? Why come to me, whom you know will not bend the names of fathers and sons?" Renly rubbed rain from his jaw. "Because I do not want my sister-in-law to gut the realm like a trout. Because my brother, both my brothers, though you count one cold and I count him the marrow of the line, deserve more than a bastard on the throne with a lion's mane and a wolf's blood to defend him. Because I love this city and hate what she does to it. And because you are not from here, you don't play their games well. That makes you dangerous to them and strangely precious to me. Loras's mouth twitched as if he couldn't quite swallow a smile. Precious, he said, and then quickly, forgive me, my lord.
Imin noyest.
Ned turned to the window and loosened the shutter just enough to see the keep's inner ward. The rain came down like 1,000 unstrung bows. He had turned away from city dragons and southern lies, and somehow he stood at the heart of both. He knew what honor said he should do. He should hand Cersei Lannister a letter and a courtesy and tell her to take her children and flee. He should tell her Stannis was coming. He should put everything on the table for the gods to see and judge. He had done so once with another queen. It had cost a boy the use of his legs. The words left him before he knew he owned them. Whom do you have in the watch? Renly's relief appeared and vanished like sheet lightning. Janos Slint can be bought. He pretends otherwise, but coin makes fine arguments. He wants a lordship. He can have one, God strike me, the Tyrell P. Erse can supply more gold than a Lannister's smile. And there are captains in the watch who remember Aerys' fires and your brother's smoke. They don't love lions as much as they love waking alive. And the King's Guard? Ned said. Barristan, Renly said. And now there was real respect in his voice. Ser Barristan will follow his oath to the crown. The crown is not a boy's head. It's the realm. If you sit as protector with a sealed letter in your hand and the city under our boots, he will not raise steel against you. Jaime is in the Riverlands with his father's men, Loras said quietly. The White Bull is dead. Meryn Trant is a cur. Boros Blunt eats lard. Aerys Oakheart is no fool. He may be swayed to sense. Mandon Moore is Mandon Moore. The Hound is no knight, and not Kingsguard, and he will hunt his own game. Ned remembered the tourney of the hand and a helm in shape of a snarling dog, and the way the Hound had turned from a boy who laughed at a cripple's terror. He remembered, too, how Sandor Clegane had cut down his brother's blade rather than slay the boy on purpose. There was a kind of savage honesty in the man. The gods love their ironies. When? Ned asked. Renly stood, not bothering with his hood. Before the dawn bell. They have a taste for theatrics, the Lannisters, and for comfort. They will not expect us before the hour that men of concept wake. Ned looked at the book on the table, at Robert's seal next to his hand, at the rain, at the single lamp burning low. His father's words came as if the snow beyond the wall had whispered them through the stone. When the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. He had left his pack in the north. But here, in the south, there were men who called themselves Pack too. If honor had a shape, it was not always an unbending rod. Sometimes it had to be the shelter of a shield. Do not harm the children, he said. I won't, Renly said. Swear it. Renly did, and Loras with him, hand upon the hilt as if the blade could hear the vow. They parted into the rain. Ned sent for Harwin and Fat Tom and a handful of the men who still lived to him. He sent for Lord Varys, because a man who knew all the doors might yet show which door not to open. And he sent for Barristan Selmy, though sending for a man said to be the soul of knighthood to share in a night's salt and conspiracy tasted like worse than wine turned in the skin. He lit no more lamps. Wisdom does not want to be seen when it looks too much like treachery. Varys glided in on soft shoes, eyes like melted wax. My lord Hand, he said mildly, the storm makes confidences of us all. Has someone left her wits in your chamber to keep your own company? You know why you're here, Ned said. I know very little, Varys said, and for a heartbeat Ned almost believed him. Only that the hour is precarious and that men who go to sleep certain of the world have a way of waking to find it altered. Pity. I am fond of sleep. You will be more fond of it if you help me secure the city, Ned said. And the children, without blood. Varys's hands trembled once, a shiver hardly heavier than silk. The children, he repeated. Yes, you would spare them if you can. I will spare them, Ned said. There is no if. He set Robert's seal between them. The king's last will names me protector. I mean to sit the throne till Stannis comes. I mean to arrest the queen. I mean to hold the children unharmed. He did not say anything about what would happen to them after, because he did not know, and he would not have Varys know that he did not know. Varys inclined his head. You have my poor sense, my lord. It will be useful. I suppose, in truth, I have little interest in finding out what song the realm sings under a lion cub who thinks himself a lion. Barristan, Ned said as the old knight stepped into the chamber, white cloak damp with fine rain. I am glad to see you.
Ser Barristan bowed.
He had the kind of face that had forgotten how to lie. And I you, Lord Stark. Ned did not waste time. He told him. He told him plain and without ceremony, and when he finished the room held its breath. Ser Barristan closed his eyes a moment, and when he opened them, the torch's light did something honorable to the lines around his mouth. I swore an oath, he said softly, to protect the king, to protect the king's legal issue, to defend the realm. The realm, Ned echoed. The realm, Barristan repeated, and nodded once. Do what you say you will do. Spare the children, hold the city, send for Stannis, and I will stand by you until my oath says otherwise. But if you break your word about the children, Lord Stark, you will answer for it to the part of me that has a sword. Ned's mouth almost made a smile. I would expect nothing less. They made their plans the way men make plans for difficult work. Quietly, without heat, dividing the city like a board, talking not at all about how easy the board's lines were to erase with a single human hand. Janos Slynt would be met and bought. Renly promised a chest heavy enough to make the commander's eyes cross. Varys would whisper to certain captains of the watch that their fortunes lay with the next dawn and not with the next day's coin. Harwin would take his men to the Tower of the Hand and the River Gate. Ser Barristan would see to the throne room, to the White Cloaks, to honor. Ned would send for the High Septon and for Maester Pycelle. Let them be present to see the seal, and let the faith's witness be counted before Cersei counted the price of buying men like bread. Only once, as the hour drew crookedly toward dawn, did Ned go to the little chamber where Sansa slept and listened to the sound of her breathing. Arya was out with Syrio Farrell until late most days and slept as if she had run across the rooftops of Bravos in her dreams. Sansa slept neat, with her hair smoothed, even in the damp heat. He stood in the door. ND remembered another red-haired girl whose whole heart had broken over a song. He wanted to tell Sansa that songs were only words, and that words could not save you when lions put their claws into you. He left her sleeping. By the time the bells had not yet tolled the second hour after night's end, the 100 swords Renly promised moved like whispers along the corridors. Loras Tyrell's men wore no colors but dark, and the rain left their boots printing the stone with small wet ghosts. Ned walked among his own, cloak pinned with a direwolf, Robert's seal at his belt. He passed through doors that opened because Varys had told the men whose hands held their bars to let them open, and by the time he reached the long gallery beyond the throne room, he knew from the hush and the way the air trembled that the city had not yet woken to the change being made within it. Janos Slynt met him at the gallery's end. He had dressed early, in breastplate and a sash of black and gold, and his eyes were bright with a new light. He made a low bow that did not sit well on him. "My Lord Hand," he said, "I have your message." Ned looked at him and thought of all the men he had seen rise quickly on the Southron tide and sink as quickly when it changed. "You have my word," he said. "You will have the lordship we spoke on when peace is set in this city." "And coin for the watch," Slynt said, cautious as a rat peering through a crack at a crumb. "You will have coin for honest watchmen and bread for their children," Ned said. "You will have honor for yourself if you earn it." Slynt smiled, the way men smile when they think of bread and honor coming together at the same table. "We will be friends, then." Ned did not say that he preferred the North's quiet to the South's friendship. He nodded once and went past. In the throne room, the Iron Throne hunched like something dragged up from a sorcerer's midden heap to mock the living. Ned had never liked it. It smelt of cold metal and old blood. The white cloaks stood like memories of snow. Ser Barristan waited at the foot of those ugly swords, helm under one arm. "The queen has been summoned," he said when Ned came to him. "Pycelle sent the boy. Varys says the hound has not left his chambers and that Ser Mandon has spoken to no one. He says many things. I do not know which of them are true, but they are all possible. I'll not stake my life on liking any of them," Ned muttered. He took his seat not on the throne itself but on the steps below it, where the hand might sit to hear petitions when the king was away, and set Robert's letter on his knee where its seal could be seen. Renly and Loras were present, bareheaded, swords belted but not drawn. Their men fanned through the hall and the galleries like shadow stitched into shadow. Varys drifted in, a pale moth, and took a place near a pillar where he could watch without seeming to watch. Maester Pycelle came, yawning, beard combed and nightcap changed for a scholar's cap, and blinked at the hall as if his eyes were not used to seeing without a royal bed before them. The queen arrived on a wave of perfume and silk, hair coiled, gown green as a meadow, Joffrey swaggering beside her like a boy in boots too big for him. Tommen came sleepy and rubbing his eyes. Myrcella's mouth was set in a line, and she had her mother's eyes but not her mother's way of looking with them. 2 white swordsmen flanked them, Ser Meryn Trant and Ser Boros Blunt, whose bellies made their armor look like barrels bound in brass. Ser Aerys Oakheart followed, his face thoughtful. Sandor Clegane came after with that insolent lope that made lesser men step away rather than be stepped upon. Cersei took in the arrangement with one glance. She did not look at Renly. She looked at Ned as if he were a draught of wine brought too warm. "My Lord Stark," she said, "is this how the North says good morning to its queen?" "The realm has no queen," Ned said. His voice could carry when winter spoke through it. "Did now. Robert named me protector at the end. I will protect his realm. He asks Stannis to return to court. He will be welcomed and crowned." She smiled. A dagger turned so its hilt looked like a jewel. "Stannis," she said. "Of course. Honest Stannis. Someday we might praise him as the only man good enough to admit he never was a boy." Her gaze sharpened on the sealed letter. "You have words to wave, I see. I have heard it said that paper is poor armor, my lord, and that a seal cracks easier than a skull." Renly shifted. Loras's hand did not quite touch his sword. Slint cleared his throat in the gallery and made a show of straightening his sash. "Words are wind," Ned said, and felt the irony of it stir old bitterness in his mouth. "This paper is the voice of a dying king. It names me protector. You will yield the crown to the law." Joffrey's laugh was a sharp sound. "I am the law," he snapped, voice breaking on the last word. "Your father was the law," Renly said softly, and anger trembled under it. "And he is dying." Cersei's gaze slashed to him. "You," she said, contempt and something like the shadow of fear beneath it. "I had wondered where you kept yourself, little brother. Behind your mother's skirts again." Renly laughed, pleasant and very cold. "I've always preferred to stand before skirts rather than behind them." Sandor Clegane watched the exchange with a dog's interest in the tone of voices, not their words. Ser Barristan moved nearer the children in a way that looked like care, and was also conveniently blocking any swift path the queen might take to the throne steps. "Enough of this," Cersei said at last, and for a heartbeat it seemed she would reach for Robert's letter to tear it. She remembered, perhaps, that there were 100 unsmiling men in this hall who would gladly take her wrist for her if she did. She straightened and called out, sweet as festival wine, "Ser Meryn, Ser Boros,
Ser Aerys,
take Lord Stark in to custody. He has presumed to sit where he has no right to sit. Summon the city watch to clear the hall." No one moved. Meryn looked at Barristan the way a well-groomed dog looks toward the hearth to see if it is safe to steal from the bowl. Boros shifted his weight. Aerys greased his palm on his cloak, nervous without being cowardly. The doors opened, and the black and gold of the city watch poured in, boots on stone, the sound like a tide through pebbles. Janos Slint strutted in their midst, chin high. Cersei's smile returned. "Ah," she said, and turned the full weight of herself toward Ned. "Your honor sits lightly on you, it seems." Look how swiftly the city comes to its proper queen. Commander Slint, Ned called, unshaken. In the name of the king and as protector of the realm, I charge you to take the queen into custody. See that no harm comes to her or to the prince and princess. The hand will speak further concerning their place of safety. Janos Slint paused. It was a long pause, measured in the way the rain hissed beyond the shutters, and in the way Loras Tyrell's fingers touched the leather of his scabbard with a small sound like a sigh. Then Slint bowed, a theater bow, and when he straightened he was facing Cersei, not Ned. "You'll come with us peaceable, your grace," he said. He glanced back over his shoulder just long enough to catch Renly's eye. Renly's face did not change. Slint smiled wider. For the first time since entering the hall, the queen's control slanted. She took one step, then stopped, calculating. She looked at Varys and found no help there. He had his hands folded in his sleeves and a face like a grieving ant. She looked at Pycelle and found only uncertainty. She looked at Barristan Selmy and found a man who would not have moved for her if she had asked him politely with tears. Her mouth went hard. "Do not touch my children," she said. "No one will," Ned said. "On my honor as a Stark." She laughed once, a small ugly sound, and in it he heard Winterfell's broken, icy echo of a sound he had heard once in a tower with a screaming child at the bottom of it. "Your honor," she said, "we shall see what coin it spends at court." But she went quietly, and Joffrey with his chin up went too, eyes daggers that couldn't yet cut. Tommen came weeping, and at the sight Ser Meryn finally found voice to protest and was told by Slint that the Watch was acting on the Hand's order and that anyone who thought to stay their hand could take the argument up with the blades of 100 men. Myrcella walked with her hands folded and her head straight, a princess who had learned long ago how to move when the currents moved you. When they were gone, the throne room emptied like a theater when the scene ends. Men exhaled without knowing they had been holding their breath. Some smiled as if afraid to be seen, not smiling now that they had chosen a side. Renly stood at the foot of the throne and looked up as if he would never desire to sit upon it. "You did well," he said. "I say it as if you needed my praise, but you did." "We did what we said we would," Ned said. His hands were steady. "We did," Renly agreed. "Now we keep what we have done." They kept it for a time. Cersei and her children were moved to apartments in the Tower of the Hand under guard that was careful without being cruel. Ser Barristan put his own honor into the watch shifts, and men who would have been delicate of conscience had they guarded a common thief stood at the princess's door without needing to talk themselves into it. Joffrey had to be pried twice from the window after he tried to shout to the yard for rescue. The second time, Sandor Clegane found him and leaned both hands on the sill, towering, and told the boy that if he yelled again he'd cut his tongue out and hand it to him on a tray with beets so it looked proper. Joffrey did not yell again. He sulked and plotted and muttered to his mother and watched everyone with a hatred that left sweat on his skin like fever. Pycelle brought the High Septon, a podgy, pious man who found himself suddenly, unexpectedly important. He listened to the reading of Robert's will and nodded and said what was needful. And when Ned told him he would summon Lord Stannis, he said that the gods loved order more than they loved kings, and that perhaps Stannis would set the kingdom aright as a man finally puts his bench back where it belongs at table. It was not exactly support, but it was not refusal. Men would call it the faith's approval later, when they needed to call it that. Varys's little birds sang in odd corners. Report came, Jaime Lannister at the head of 6,000 men near the Riverlands, Tywin Lannister heavier with host than that, riding down upon the Trident's feeder streams, looking to avenge a son and humble a Tully. No support from the Vale. Lisa Arryn closing her doors and reminding the world that she had a child to keep safe from all breezes. The Reach quiet as a cat at the hearth, tail flicking. Dorne silent but watching the windows for how the wind pushed the flames. Renly sent letters, and so did Ned. And so did Stannis's raven from Dragonstone fly away with a new message on its leg. "Bring Stannis in with honor," Ned told Varys. "No letters that call him otherwise than what he is. Send him the seal. Let him see that we mean this for his coronation, not for our own comfort." Varys bowed and bowed again, and when he left the room, Renly let out a breath he had been hiding somewhere under his ribs. "We are a dragon with two heads," he said dryly. "You and I cannot last, people say. And yet I think we are not the Targaryens, and what failed them might not fail us." Ned did not answer the jest. He looked toward the Tower of the Hand, where he could imagine Cersei walking and measuring the walls and memorizing guard rotations the way a lover memorizes hands. "You asked me not to warn her," he said softly. Renly looked anywhere but at Ned. Rain had passed, and in the new light the Red Keep was the color of old meat. "If you had warned her," he said, "she would have slit every throat between you and the throne. She'd have poisoned your wine, or your daughters. She'd have taken you in your bed. She'd have made the city lists of every man who ever owed you a favor and then called them traitors in their hearts. She moves faster than a thought. We needed to be faster than a habit." "I know it," Ned said. Knowing did not make it sit sweeter. Sansa learned before he could tell her. Servants talk, and the castle is as full of voices as a market. She came to him in the solar, eyes wide and shining, and made a little curtsy that was almost prim. "Father, there are guards at the Queen's door. Joffrey." She stopped and swallowed. "What have you done?" "What I had to," Ned said. He had never liked the haste with which the South left him lying when he wanted to sit longer with a decision. "Joffrey will not be king." "He will," Sansa said, and for a moment he saw in her a reflection of Catelyn at this age, full of things learned from tapestries and tapestries that had left out as many truths as they told. "Everyone knows. It's always the eldest son. And he's very brave, father. He is. He will be a fine king once his temper is schooled. If you would only... Father, have you forgotten he is betrothed to me?" Her hands fluttered, and then she caught them in each other like birds caught in a net. "Please, tell the Queen you did not mean it. Or tell her. Tell her we will go back to Winterfell, and I will write to Joffrey to forgive you. He will, I know he will." He wanted to be gentler than winter. He wanted to find words that would not bruise. He found only truth, and he took it in his hands like nettles because it was all he had. "Sansa, Robert named me protector. Joffrey is not Robert's son." She stared without blinking. "What a horrible thing to say." "I wish I could say otherwise," he said. He tried to explain without explaining. The book's steady drumbeat, black hair, the way the children's gold shone like something forged not in the forge of Robert's body. He saw the instant when her faith fled, not because she believed him, but because she did not and could not and would not, and the world would be a place where a father could say such a thing to a daughter, and that world was unbearable. She fled, and he did not follow her right away because he was protector of a realm and there were faceless thousands whose safety lay in the next thing he chose to do or not do, and because he was a father and there was one face he could not look at without wanting to be only father. Arabesques of days followed, long as a southern summer. On Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon read the letter twice and then again, as if it were a ledger and mistake could be found if the lines were balanced. Davos Seaworth stood by the window and watched gulls fling white curses against black cliffs. Melisandre's hands were folded in her sleeves, and the red of her dress made the chamber's shadows look like old wine. "At last," Stannis said, his mouth doing something that might have been satisfaction and might have been a grimace of pain. "He calls for me at last, and it is not a trick." "Even if it were," Melisandre murmured, "the Lord of Light would make straight the crooked path, but I smell no oath broken in these words. This man of ice does what he says." "Not ice," Davos murmured. "Snow. He is a Stark." "What matters is that he sees the truth," Stannis said. "Cersei's bastards have no claim. The realm has been ruled by a mare and her stallion too long." He looked at Davos. "How many hulls can we have in the water by week's end?" Davos thought of harbors and tides and men's hands, of the way a fleet moves when wind is less favorable than will. "Enough, your grace," he said. "Enough to take you to a city that wants your lawful crown." Melisandre's eyes were a furnace. "A lawful crown," she said, savoring the words and finding them insufficient. "We must speak also of the true war, my king, but you will not hear it tonight. Tonight we sail for lesser fires." Stannis ignored the insult and the promise. He called for his armor and for the standard with the crown stag. He did not call for music. The sea sang whether men wanted to hear or not. At Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister sat in a high chair that looked too narrow for a man as controlled as he. The letter came and was placed upon the table beneath a golden candlestick in the shape of a lion's paw. He read, and when he finished he cut the seal in pieces with a quiet delight that had no delight in it. "They have my daughter," he said in a voice like a sword drawn in a quiet room. "Alive," Tyrion said from his place below the salt. He wore dusty leathers from the road and someone else's impatience. "Even I must call that wise. She is better at living than dying." Tywin's regard slid over him the way oil slides over stone. "They have my daughter," he repeated. "They moved to crown Stannis. They say my grandchildren are something other than what they are." He lifted his eyes, and now there was heat in them. "Jaime will hold the river roads. I will teach the Tullis manners. We will take the boy king from whatever hole the wolf stuffs him in and place him upon his proper chair. The realm will follow as it always has. Men obey strength. And the truth?" Tyrion asked, careless of his own head the way a man is when his head has seemed a bad bargain more than once before. "Does the realm obey that still, father?" Tywin's lip lifted. "The realm obeys what it is given. Truth is a matter of penance. Go to the Riverlands. Advise your brother. Keep him from being beautiful and foolish in the same hour. If you cannot, bring me back what is left." Tyrion left Casterly Rock with a sense of standing at the edge of a great stage and knowing he would fall through the trapdoor no matter how carefully he tr. Ot. He collected a hill tribe or two because he liked unlikely odds and because their savagery was like a mirror of the civil savagery he had been raised to call courtesy. In the Riverlands, Robb Stark learned the news of his father's victory, if that was the word for it, with a shout barely kept from turning into tears. He had been calling the banners. Now he turned to his mother, and for a moment he was a boy again before war tried his name on. "If father is safe," he said, "do we still march?" Catelyn's face was the face of a woman who had made a sacrifice in a temple and then found the gods wanted another. "Your grandfather's lands burn," she said simply. "Jaime Lannister rides under a lion whose claws are very sharp. Your father cannot be everywhere at once. He needs you in the Riverlands as he needed you in the North once." Robb nodded once, as if sealing something with himself. "The river," he said, "and then back to father. Walder Frey would not let them cross without the price that always paces with a Frey. But with a father yet living and a crown not set upon a boy's ruined hopes, the bargain felt less like throwing a feast to a wolf while hoping to pet it. Catelyn spoke for her son. Walder spoke for his pride. In the end, Edmure Tully's hand was pledged to one of the Frey brood, and Robb was allowed to ride. This time there would be no songs about insult and a maiden left waiting with a broken betrothal. This time the gods were offered a smaller coin. Robb made his crossings and fought his fights and surprised Jaime Lannister in the cold dark near the Whispering Wood. And when the light rose, the Kingslayer wore chains instead of pride. Robb sent a raven to King's Landing with its iron news, and for once a raven brought something that was only unalloyed good to one man's ears. Ned stood at a window and closed his eyes and remembered a boy with a sword carved for his hand, and he let himself breathe as if for the first time since he had ridden south. Stannis arrived 2 days later with sails like teeth in a mouth. The city that had been taught by 2 kings to expect a warship in the bay only when fire was sure to follow instead beheld a stern man with a jaw like a siege wall and a banner whose stag looked down on the red keep like a challenge. He disembarked in armor that had been scraped so clean that it left no room for ornament. Ser Davos Seaworth walked 1 step behind his king, unremarkable as any man whose remark is the last word you want to hear. Melisandre walked in their shadow and turned heads by doing nothing but turn them. The smell of smoke followed her though no brazier burned. Ned met Stannis before the steps of the throne room, with Renly at his side and half the city balanced upon their 2 pairs of shoulders. He knelt. He was not a man given to kneeling. "Your Grace," he said, felt right, like the clink of mail set in its proper ring. Stannis looked down and saw only a man doing his duty, not any kind of adulation. "Lord Stark," he said, You have done as the law requires. I will not forget it. He meant it, which was both comfort and trouble. Men who mean what they say make enemies of those who prefer words to be soft and pliable. Melisandre's voice was a bell rung twice. The Lord's light shines upon the crown at last. Renly cleared his throat. He had put aside any thought of laughter for this hour, but he had not become a man who was comfortable in silence. Stannis, he said, there was no brother. There would not be yet. The city is yours. Stark and I have kept it for your coming. The queen and her issue are safe in the tower. Stannis's face did not move. He had the sea's look, the way it pretends stillness and is never still. And when will I see my chair? He asked. Now, Ned said, and turned and led him in. Some men would have sought spectacle. Stannis sought proofs. The High Septon was summoned and spoke loudly about oaths and crowns until Stannis told him to be quiet. Pycelle shuffled his chains and proved less weighty than he looked. Varys smiled and bowed lower than seemed possible. Barristan Selmy knelt and offered his sword with the kind of ceremony the old gods would not have disdained, and Stannis, who could be graceless as a storm, took the oath with grace because that was owed to the caliber of the man kneeling before him. Renly stood aside and put his hand on Loras's shoulder when Loras looked like a man trying not to draw his weapon against the man his lover's brother had become. The matter of Cersei was not ceremony. It was a wound that let anger and fear seep. She was brought into the hall with her children, all the world watching from the galleries and the corridors and the great space where men decide what to call justice. Stannis did not stand until she stood. He did not give her regard. He merely pointed at the book, and at the letter of Robert, and at the children's faces and said, "This is the proof." Cersei looked at him the way a woman looks at a cruel man she once thought she could make bend to her. "Proof," she mocked. "You have opened a book and found a pattern. You say it means an oath. I say it means a story. But the realm eats stories, doesn't it, Stannis? It eats them with spice and wine and then shits out law." Her voice turned honey. "You want the world to be made of lines drawn by men. I prefer it made of men. We will see whose ink runs first." "The law is not ink," Stannis said. "It is the stone laid in place at the building. Break it and the house falls on your head." He pronounced judgment. There were some who thought to see him order the girl Myrcella be sent to a sept and the boys to some cold exile. But Stannis did not trinket with half measures. The law said they were not rightful. He would not call them bastard out loud in front of their faces because he hated waste and knew that dignity was a resource. He stripped them of claim and ordered that they be kept as royal wards untie. The realm's peace made it safe to send them to Casterly Rock under guard, there to live unclaiming. Cersei laughed, low and dangerous. "And who will be the guards?" she asked. "Men who took their vows from a stag's lips? You are worse than the Mad King because you will dress your cruelty as order." Ned spoke then because he could not let the words pile up. "There will be no cruelty," he said. "They will be fed and schooled. They will be allowed the faith. No harm will come to them. If any man harms them, he will answer first to me and then to the king." She turned her head as if the wind had brought a smell she did not like. "Your daughter," she said softly, and Ned understood she had not forgiven him the tower, that she had not forgiven him mercy when she had hoped to be given a knife to sharpen. "Has your little bird stopped singing? Or does she still warble pretty for her prince?" Sansa, standing behind Septa Mordane on the gallery, blanched and moved as if someone had pushed her. Arya did not move. Syrio Farrell had been teaching her how to stand within herself in a way Ned did not approve of. He was not displeased to see that she could do it now without thinking. The matter of Littlefinger was simpler. Renly had had the satisfaction of ordering him taken in a quiet stare. Littlefinger went with a smile he wore as if sewn on, and when he was brought to the hall, he made a show of slouching, as if the chains that kept his hands taught him a new posture. "Lord Baelish," Stannis said. He did not spit. He did not, to his credit, waste words. "You bought and sold the coin of the realm as if it were seed thrown for pigeons. You sought to turn the city watch. You played your game." He looked to Ned. Ned stepped forward and felt his heart grow heavy and then lighter. I show that you offered me counsel you knew would lead to my destruction, he said. I show that you paid coin to have men's loyalties turned from oath to purse. But I also show that you did not, in the end, bring harm to the queen's issue with any hand of yours. He did not know why he said it. He did know. He did not want the next man to see that harm to children could ever be weighed in a balance with the ease of his own schemes. Littlefinger smiled sadly, as if he and Ned shared a joke over the heads of everyone else in the hall. You should have listened to me before, he said. You would have lived more comfortably. I do not value comfort so highly, Ned said. Take him away. The Tower of the Hand took Littlefinger. There are places in a fortress where laughter cannot find you. He kept smiling as they closed the door. The Reach stirred at last when Renly sent letters sealed with the crown stag and the green of Renly's own banner. Not because Mace Tyrell had any love for Stannis' sense of unbending, but because he had love for the shape of alliances. They sent riders to speak of terms. Renly met them in the King's Garden, which smelled of wet lavender and the sea, and told them the truth. He would not be king while Stannis lived, because the law said otherwise. The riders left uncertain, but they left less afraid than they had arrived. When the Tyrell's second letter came, it was a different sort. It did not mention Renly except to call him gracious. It proposed a betrothal between Sansa Stark and Willis Tyrell, to be sealed when she came into her womanhood. It proposed a dowry that would make a northern lord blush and a Reachman's idea of generosity look poverty-struck. It proposed, in short, a woven future that would bind the north and south in reach and crown. Ned read it twice and then sent for Sansa and for Catelyn's advice in a letter that traveled along the king's roads under roof of the law that had begun, finally, to struggle upright again. Sansa cried at first because love does ugly things to a heart when it finds it has poured itself into a cup with holes. Then she asked careful questions about Willis Tyrell and was told that he was kind and book-learned and lamed from a fall, and yet a better man than many uninjured. She dried her eyes and said she would do as her father wished because she was a lady, and Ned had to excuse himself and go to stand in the yard a while, where he could look at the sky and pretend it was northern. In Stannis' court, which used to be Robert's and had not yet learned how to be anyone else's, Davos watched the way Renly and Melisandre moved about each other like cats on a wall, wary and disdainful, each certain he could push the other into dust if it came to that. Stannis ignored the shape of their dance and set himself to balancing the realm. He sent letters to Dorne that were not apologies but acknowledgments. He sent for new coin to be minted that would show the stag alone without the lion's sneer at its heels. He appointed men not because he liked them but because the realm would work better if they did the work. He asked Ned to remain his hand, and Ned agreed because if he went north the South would simply give his work away to the next man who liked games better than sleeplessness. When the Raven came with the words Jaime Lannister taken, scrawled like a boast and a plea in the same hand, Stannis ordered quiet thanksgiving and no feast. We feast when the war ends, he said. Not every time we shove the enemy one pace. But that night Davos thought he saw him stand long at the window and look east, toward Dragonstone, and toward the veil of sea between him and a place where his stern gods had been kind to him once. Cersei tested every stone and found that some did not move. She taught Tommen how to play Syvas and did not tell him who to trust. She told Myrcella that the world would call her many things and that she must choose which of those things would save her on the day when men shouted. She told Joffrey a story about Starks who had eaten their children to live in some winter long forgotten and marveled to see the way his eyes brightened. She tried to see Sandor Clegane into betraying his post with words and saw his face twist into something like sorrow before it hardened again. She cursed Jaime by name when she thought no one heard and then whispered his name to herself like a prayer at night. Arya sparred with Syrio Farrell in a long gallery with windows onto the sea. The crab walks sideways, he told her, and she did, and she laughed when she slipped and almost fell and caught herself on a sill. You are quick now. You must be quicker. You told me not to be seen, Arya said. Zounds of salt speckled the glass. And then I was seen by father. He said I move like a shadow with stones in my pocket. He has a wolf's eyes and a father's mouth, Syrio said, amused. Both see too much and say too little. Today you will learn to dance on the edge. They danced. The city held its breath between one war and the next. It did not last. One night Renly came late to the king's council, cloak unpinned, face white, a letter crushed in his fist. He tossed it to the table, where it uncurled slowly, like an eel. Marjorie Tyrell's hand was elegant, though the letter's body came from Highgarden mouths. The Reach invited him to come to Bitterbridge to speak of roses and thorns and crowns. He laughed because he had an audience. His eyes did not laugh. In another world, he said idly to Stannis, I would have gone. In another world, Stannis said, you would be more like me. In this world, Renly returned, I have never wanted that. Ned watched something thick as blood crawl over the words not said. He did not think Renly would go. He did not think Renly would claim. He thought Renly would do what he had done thus far. Chafe and be loyal at once, like a hawk kept hooded and well-fed. He had learned too little of prophecy to taste it in the air when Melisandre watched Renly leave the council chamber with a look in her eyes like someone who had found a door she had been trying not to see and would now pass through it. On a night without moon, something moved in the Tower of the Hand that was not a man and yet did a man's work. Davos Seaworth sat in the belly of the kitchen because a man who had grown up smuggling knows how to sleep near where fires are tended. He woke when the fire dipped and then flared as if someone had breathed on it from within. He followed the heat. He told himself it was to see that no coals had been kicked into dry rushes. He told himself many things men tell themselves when they do not want to admit they are walking toward fear because fear has their name written on its face. In a corridor, he saw light shaped like a man's shadow and moving like a snake. It slipped under a door he knew did not open onto any place but a sleeping chamber. Renly lay within with his boots off and his sword within easy reach, because he had sense. The shadow knelt on his chest and put hands where hands are put and stole his breath like a treasurer stealing coin. Renly clawed and thrashed and then went still. Davos stumbled forward too late to be anything but witness. The shadow turned its head and looked at him, and for a heartbeat he saw a mouth that had spoken his name once in kindness on a deck, and he understood with a nausea that felt like the sea turning underneath him. In the morning, Loras Tyrell's scream tore the red keep like a sail. He came out into the yard in a shirt and no cloak and a sword in his hand. He did not weep. He killed a man of Stannis's guard who could not scramble out of his way fast enough. He would have killed more if Ser Barristan had not walked into his path like a wall you could not see and caught Loras's blade on the flat and gave him back enough of his life to keep him from doing something that would be called treason and remembered forever. Who did this? Loras demanded, the words as raw as iron pulled from a forge. Grief, Barristan said. Grief did this. Go sleep. Then decide whom to blame. Loras went to sleep. He did not forget. The Reach's letters turned sour. Mace Tyrell made a noise like a man being insulted and a noise like a man being afraid in the same breath. The marriage to Willis was not quite withdrawn, but it was asked to be delayed. Ned closed his eyes and thought of Sansa, and of Catelyn in the Riverlands, and of how many things could slip through your fingers when you were holding as tightly as you knew how. Stannis did not admit. He did not deny. He looked at Melisandre and did not look away when she returned his gaze. He said to the council and to no one, "We cannot afford division." He did not say, "My brother is dead." He did not say, "I had a brother." For 3 days the city walked as if its boots did not fit. Renly's 100 swords sheathed themselves or transferred their loyalty where honor or anger told them. Some left. Loras left in the night with a handful of men. Ned had tried to speak to him before he went. The boy had looked at him with a courtesy that had sharpened into hatred when courtesy proved insufficient to bear what needed bearing. "I know what I am," Loras said tightly. "I am what you think I am. I am what they say. None of that matters. What matters is that he is dead and the fire took him, and I cannot light the world enough to get him back." "Don't light the world," Ned said, hating himself for speaking plain to a boy who had earned some lies. "You will burn yourself first." Loras left anyway. The city went on. It always does. Tywin Lannister did not move quicker because of Renly's death, but he moved with more certainty, as if one of 10 doors he might have tried had swung open without his hand on it. He marched toward Harrenhal with fire and steel. With Jaime a captive, he cared more about vengeance than about elegance. The Riverlands winced and bled. Robb moved again where he could. Edmure fought bravely and not always well. Catelyn negotiated where a sword did not reach. The war changed its shape but did not stop. Within King's Landing, Stan, Nis strengthened law. Men did not love him, but they learned quickly how to behave when a man who thought law a stone put his hands on their shoulders and turned them toward the law. He summoned lords as Aegon had once done. They came. They came because the city was held and the crown was not a child's plaything anymore, and because they saw in Stannis a dangerous thing. A man who would not forgive and would not forget and would not be bought, and who would take their grudges seriously because he took weighing things seriously. It is a relief, sometimes, to be measured by someone who has no favorites. Ned wrote to Catelyn about Sansa and Willis. He wrote also of Arya, whose dancing lessons he had not stopped. "She will need a different dance," he wrote, and then crossed it out and wrote nothing in its place. He wrote to Robb and told him, as he would tell any captain, what he could do with the men he had to aid the war that still walked through their cousins' fields. He tried to be father and hand both. It would have been easier to be one and fail at the other. A raven came from the wall. It spoke of a different cold. It spoke of dead men not staying dead, of rangers lost, of blue eyes in a night that did not make darkness like a southern night. Stannis took the letter, read it with his jaw set, and set it aside. "We finish one war at a time," he said. "Then we go north." Davos heard the slip. He said we. There was hope in that, of a sort, as there is hope in a man who thinks the realm is his to carry and will not set it down. The trial of Cersei, when it came, was not called that. Stannis would not dignify it with language that gave her a stage. He called it judgment, and it had all the bloodless cruelty of that word. He laid out proofs and called witnesses and showed the city not only the book but the life. Jon Arryn's words to his maester, the whispers Varys had collected and could finally be made to stand still, the grooms who had died, the servants who had seen. He did not dwell on the immoral. He dwelt on the illegal. He sentenced her to confinement in the Great September of Baelor until he judged the realm secure enough to consider her fate further. She went with her head high and her mouth promising that if ever she left, she would leave with the city's throat between her teeth. Joffrey was removed to the old Maegor's holdfast and set under the care of men too dull to be cowed by a boy's cleverness and too honest to be bribed. Tommen was given books and tutors and a horse led about under guard because kindness would be less easy to turn into a knife. Myrcella was asked what she wanted, and she said she wanted to go for walks in the garden and smell the orange blossoms that did not grow there. And when told they did not grow, she looked at a gardener and asked if he might try to make them. And the man bowed and said he would, and Ned Stark, who had seen a maple made to grow where winter hated maps, believed he would. At last, the realm's eyes looked toward Harrenhal. Tywin sat there like ruin wearing gold, daring the world to come and dislodge him from a place already dislodged from everything else. Robb considered trying. Ned forbade it with a letter that used his name, not his title. "Do not throw men into the lake to get back a stone that has sunk," he wrote. "Hold Riverrun, harry his lines, make him bleed, let him come to us." In King's Landing, a strange calm took root. There were no tourneys. Stannis did not value splendor. There were judgments, some of them bone-chilling in their cold fairness, and there were small mercies, some of them so unexpected that men muttered that the hand must have whispered in one ear while Melisandre whispered in the other. Ned did not whisper. He advised. He refused. He persuaded. He lost as often as he won. He slept sometimes. He woke often. He walked sometimes at dusk along the walls and looked at the dark, low-bellied clouds that made the sea look like hammered lead. He thought of Winterfell and of the Godswood and of how the heart tree held silence differently than these walls did. He thought of Jon, and of a letter that sat in his chest as much as in a desk, never written and always at his tongue's edge. He did not write it. He did not send for the boy. He told himself that if he brought his bastard son into the red coil of this city, he would lose him as surely as bringing snow into a hearth robs it of itself. One evening he found Ser Barristan standing by a window, looking not at the sea but at the square where the folk came to market. The knight's face, in certain lights, was complicated with grief. "Do you miss it?" Ned asked, though he did not know which it he meant. I miss being sure, Barristan said softly. I was sure once. The white sword was simple. You drew it when you must. You put it away when you must. You did not have to decide which king to call king. They told you, and in return you gave them everything else. He smiled a little. Now I am older and am asked to choose like a man. It is harder. It always was, Ned said. You were too young then to know it. Barristan chuckled, as if this were the best thing anyone had said to him in weeks. Perhaps, he said, and perhaps somewhere there is a boy dressed in white with a better face and a worse heart who thinks all this very easy. If there is, Ned said, we would do well to keep him from the hall. News from the east came slow. There were whispers of a girl with dragons. Ned ignored them because men who have learned to count the names in a house often learn also to ignore stories about fire. Stannis did not ask. The sea held his attention, not the desert. The wall sent another raven. The hand that wrote had changed. The words were less sure. Men had gone into the woods north and not returned. The wildlings were gathering at Craster's or moving along the milk-white wastes. Stannis read with the same face he wore at a siege map. Davos urged action and was told. Not yet, Ned told Stannis. My brother is there, and Stannis said, your duty is here. Ned did not tell him that duty is a chain you put around your own throat before anyone else can. In the end, it was not violence that forced the next change but law writ with swords. Tywin moved. He moved not toward King's Landing but toward the Trident in a way that made men think he meant to cross it, and then he did not. He set fires and then put them out. He issued challenges and then ignored answers. He was teaching the realm that it could be tired to death. The realm learned quickly. It always does when the teacher has enough coin. So Stannis did something that surprised even the men who thought they knew him. He called a great council to King's Landing, to which he bade all lords with any claim to their lordships or any interest in being listened to come and speak. He did not call it to choose a king. He had no patience for that story. He called it to settle in law what had been unsettled in practice. Succession, wardship, crown finance, the faith's rights. Men came because they feared to let these matters be decided without them, and because they feared what Stannis would do if they did not come. The hall filled with so much pride it became hard to breathe for it. Ned stood at the edge of it and watched the clot form. The moving figures of men with names old and new trying to shape the law to be more like their wishes than like anything that would last once they stopped looking at it. He caught himself almost smiling. He had wanted to sit at Winterfell and not hear, and yet he understood that this was also a kind of winter work. Setting the roof beams and making sure the white winds had less to take when they came. The council spoke of money until it wanted to weep. It spoke of rights until it wanted to fight. It spoke of Dorne, of the reach of the Riverlands and the Westerlands and their bleeding. It spoke of the Crownlands and how they had been treated like a purse, not like a garden. It spoke of ravens until the ravens themselves must have blushed to be discussed so often. At the end of it, after days that left men pale, Stannis had not softened. But he had listened, and the law he laid down had a shape that did not look like only himself. He confirmed the succession as it had always been written. The king's lawful issue, then his brother, then his brother's issue. He set in stone that in cases of doubt, a council of regents would be named by the lords of the realm to carry the crown until certainty could be had. He established that coin would henceforth be accounted not by a single man's hand, but by a board that included merchants as well as lords, to the horror of Pycelle and the amusement of Varys. He stated that the faith's militant arm would remain broken. The realm did not need holy swords until it had fewer profane ones. He did not declare amnesty for the Lannisters. He offered terms. Jaime Lannister would be tried, not for the murder of the king, the old king was long dead, but for breaking his oath if that could be proved, and for his conduct in the Riverlands. Cersei would remain under watch. The children would be held. The West would bend knee and pay indemnity, or not, and learn what law means when law is made of steel. It was, in its way, generous. Tywin wrote back on handsome parchment that dripped contempt and eloquence in the same strokes. He said the West would not be judged by a man who had forgotten he was lesser to a king even if he wore a crown. He said his children had been slandered. He said he would bring proof of their fathering if the court wished to know the bedchambers of its kings better than it confessed. He said he would bring fire and gold. He began to bring both. The fighting continued. Men learned, again, that no king makes war alone. He uses sons and brothers and the strength of old grudges. Ned sent what help he could without emptying the city. Stannis held the capital like a man who has been given a treasure he never asked for to mind. There were ration days. There were days of judgment. There were days when the sea was so kind that men forgot they had ever been cruel to one another. There were days when a woman in a red gown walked through the galleries as if she were counting something whose tally would not be known until the last fire went out. And through it all, Ned made himself do the thing he had told himself he would when he first said yes to Renly in the rain. He did not let harm come to the Queen's children. When a cook's boy snapped at Tommen for spilling stew, Ned had the boy caned not because he thought a boy should not be angry, but because that anger must not be taught that these children were safe to hate. When two guards turned their back a moment too long and found Myrcella at the edge of the garden watching the sea like a woman in a ballad, he did not have them whipped. He changed the guard rotations and put men with daughters on the posts outside her door. When Joffrey scrawled a crude picture of Eddard Stark bending the knee to a lion and gave it to him with a smirk as if daring him to be offended, Ned folded it without looking and later stood by the brazier and watched it burn. He did not tell anyone about the way the boy's eyes had filled when he realized his attempt had not scratched. He went, once, to the great September of Baelor to see Cersei in her white cell. He did not enter. He stood in the hall and listened to a low song that might have been prayer or mockery and did not belong to any goddess he had learned at his mother's knee. He turned and left. The Septon bowed and did not take offense. Men understand some silences. At last, there came a truce of sorts in the west. Tywin tried one thrust too many and found Robb Stark's cavalry on his flank with a wolf's hunger. He withdrew to Lannisport and made strength from pride, which is the Lannister way when blood does not suffice. He sent a letter that said nothing in. Dee promised less. He asked for Jaime. Stannis refused and offered instead to take Tyrion Lannister as hostage if that would sweeten patience. Tywin sent a hunting horn and said, "This is what I send when I hunt." Tyrion shrugged and stayed with his clansmen because a wise man sometimes knows when to be less useful. There were small joys, absurd ones. Arya blew out her candle and managed to catch Sirio's wooden sword in darkness twice for the first time. Sansa learned to speak of Willis without crying. Renly's 100 men left in the city, those who had not gone south with Loras, drank once in the Hand's kitchens to their old lord's memory and did not brawl. They told stories about him that made men who had never loved Renly think perhaps love were not such a foolish thing to have spent on him. Davos found a sprat in his bread and brought it to Stannis with a little smile, and Stannis almost smiled back before remembering he had a face and a crown and that the two never fit comfortably. Ned went to sleep one night and dreamed of Winterfell covered in glass, and of a boy with his father's eyes standing in the courtyard and saying nothing because men like that know that words have to be earned by longer silences. He woke to a knock. It was Varys with a face like someone who has seen too much and cannot, for once, pretend otherwise. "The wall," Varys said and held out a letter. Ned read. He swallowed. He read again. The dead were moving. The first ranger had not returned. The Lord Commander spoke of signs and called for aid without calling it that, because pride is a northern thing as much as southern. He handed the letter to Stannis and watched the king's mouth thin. "We have won war," Stannis said, but this time the words sounded wrong to him as soon as he uttered them. "We have won war," he repeated, and then quieter. "And a greater war." Ned did not say, "I told you." He said, "I will send my son home when this is settled." He did not add, "if it is settled." He did not think the gods would take kindly to being reminded. He went to the Tower of the Hand and found Sansa asleep and Arya awake and Syrio Farrell sitting in a shadow, as if the shadow were a chair he had paid for. "You will go home," he said, and both girls made the noise that daughters make when home is a word that tastes of sweet and of the ache of leaving. "When it is safe." "When is that?" Arya asked, always knife to the sheath of matters. "When your father says so," Ned said gently. Outside, the sea spoke. It always does. The red keep settled around its sleepers like a hunting cat who had decided to close its eyes. Ned went to the window and stood there long enough to see the first light lay its gold across the black water. He thought for a strange drifting moment of Renly in the rain, smiling with his mouth and not with his eyes, asking for an ally and getting, instead, a man who would always be a little alone even in rooms full of people who called his name. He thought of Stannis, who had taken what he was due and not made a festival of it, and of a board where men had moved pieces and found that sometimes the board moved back. He thought of a girl across the sea with a story about fire. He thought of wolves in the snow and of the way a winter sky looks as if it has been rubbed with powdered bone. He had not wanted this city, this crown, this world of raised voices and bent heads. He had wanted to come and go like a good guest, to drink with his friend and go home to his wife and his gods would. He had done what he had to in a place where doing what you had to often looks like betrayal to someone. He would likely do more of it before the ledger closed. The gulls cried. The city woke. The Iron Throne hunched behind him like a reminder that some chairs are not for sitting in but for reminding. He would go on. He would hold to what he was. He would keep the children safe until the day came when the realm's safety no longer required it. He would tie alliances quietly and cut knots with law instead of with blades where he could. He would send ravens for the north and for the wall that would be true and unembroidered. He would, when the time came, put his hand to a hilt and not a feather if that was what the snow required. He believed not in prophecy but in keeping faith. He had kept it this far. The rest he would meet as men meet winter, with what would they had, with what warmth they could keep in their bones, with the knowledge that some nights last longer than they should and that dawn still comes, even then.